And you did some pretty unusual and exciting work in biogeochemistry in the deep sea. What got you interested in working with these tiny little microbes and in general with deep ocean research?
To my undergrad at Cornell, where I was studying microbiology, and I realized that there are microbes all around us on every surface, in every ecosystem, and these microbes are really important to the planet. And I decided then that I would be interested in studying microbes that live in the environment and microbes that have an impact on animal life on the planet. And so I became interested in the deep sea through my interest in the fact that microbes in the deep sea, especially at these deep sea hydrothermal vents, are really important and play a really big role in the animal life that's there and the ecosystems there. And so my interest in the deep sea came through my interest in microbiology.
You note in your research that the overwhelming majority of eukaryotic organisms are symbiotically associated with microbes. That really struck me. Can you kind of set the stage for that and give us a little background on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think this is actually something that is pretty a new concept, which is this idea that life on this planet, especially animals, plants, fungi, protists, are pretty much all of them are associated in some way with microbes, bacteria and archaea. And these microbes can influence their health, their functioning. I mean, if you think about us, there's estimates that we have 10 times the number of bacteria are in our guts than the cells in our own bodies. And we're learning more and more every day that these bacteria for us are critical to our own health and functioning. So this is the same thing for life all over the planet. And so I became really interested in understanding the microbial life and how it interacts with larger multicellular organisms like animals, and the role that these microbes can play in the functioning ecology, physiology, and biology of these larger animals.
What are some important geochemistry, biochemistry principles that are important for high school students to learn about?
I mean, I guess I would argue, as someone who studies chemosynthesis, that that's an important process to understand. I think most students leave high school, I would assume, with some understanding of photosynthesis. They know that plants and algae photosynthesize, and that produces the base of the food web for most of the life that they're familiar with. But I think it's important to understand that there's these other processes out there that are driven by microbes, by bacteria and archaea, that are completely different than the metabolism that we're more familiar with. And so chemosynthesis is one of these processes. And this is where bacteria can use chemical energy as the basis for fixing organic carbon or making sugar that can then be the basis for other life. So I think that's really important. And then generally also, because again, I'm biased towards microbes have all sorts of fascinating metabolisms and interact with chemistry in ways that I think, can be unfamiliar to most people. And this is things like there are microbes that can breathe things other than oxygen. They can breathe iron, they can breathe sulfur. And so there's all sorts of metabolisms that are out there that are, more than just what we're familiar with, which is, animal life for the most part. Yeah, so this is an image from a cruise in 2016, actually on the RV Falcor, which was shown as one of the partner organizations. And in this cruise, what we're doing is we're trying to measure the geochemistry around a group of hydrothermal vent animals on the seafloor. And so what you're seeing is basically an inverted funnel. This is a funnel that we have placed, and those are actually baking sheets. They're silicone baking, sheets or baking liners, I guess, usually, that are silicone that are used, in your oven to make cookies, and they're temperature tolerant. And so what we do is we is basically taking this inverted funnel and placing it around these animals on the seafloor so that we can contain them. And then what you're seeing in this video here is that we're using a device that measures the chemistry of the fluid to sort of contain the fluid that's rising up through the funnel, and then we can stick that sensor at the top and measure the chemical concentrations that are coming out of the top. So basically, what we can do is see the chemical conditions that the animals are experiencing at the bottom of the ocean.
I loved your point of how important chemosynthesis is for us to understand. It's just so important that you talk about this because it has such an impact on life on our planet. How has 40 years of studying vents affected our understanding of geology and biology that we wouldn't have known otherwise?
I'm thinking of an example that's biology, and for me is really interesting. And this is so, we discovered at Hydrothermal vents these animals that have evolved a symbiosis with chemosynthetic bacteria. So they're essentially farming these bacteria in or on their bodies that are using the chemical energy from vents to then provide the nutrition for that animal completely. And so many of these animals have lost the ability to consume food. There are some tube worms that don't have a mouth or a gut anymore. They basically are just tubes full of bacteria that provide their food. And so this was this discovery that no one had ever seen this before, this animal life based on this symbiosis. And we discovered it in these remote habitats at the bottom of the earth. But what we found is that actually these are common, or they're present in other ecosystems that are much more familiar. And so, for example, in Rhode Island, we have a clam that lives in our coastal habitats that has exactly the same kind of symbiotic relationship. What it's using is there's sulfide produced by sediment. So that sort of sulfidic, eggy smell that you smell when you go by a salt marsh, that's hydrogen sulfide gas, and that's being produced by microbes in the sediment. And so there are clams that are doing the same exact thing. They're farming bacteria as their food source. They're not eating. And these are just in our coastal ponds. And we actually discovered these after we discovered these symbioses at vents. And so, this, to me, I think that's really interesting. You can find them very easily. I can go out and dig up these clams, any day of the week very easily. And yet we did not understand that symbiosis until we discovered them at hydrothermal vents.